Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight, my guest is Caroline Cory, but before I bring her on, I got to remind you that you can always get new episodes free on Rokfin, Odysee, and all podcast platforms. Check us out on Rokfin. It's where you get all our premium content, regular shows, and every show and premium content from every creator there on Rokfin. Check out our merch store, get yourself some t-shirts, stickers, and bags, all kinds of cool stuff. That link is in the description or fknstore.net. Tonight I want to welcome to the show Caroline Cory. She is an award-winning filmmaker and the visionary author of the best-selling books on consciousness, science, and energy medicine. As a child and throughout her life, she has had numerous ESP and otherworldly encounters, which led her to become deeply connected to existential topics, the study of consciousness, and the mechanics of the universe. After teaching energy medicine and consciousness work for over a decade, she founded Omnium Media, an entertainment and media platform that tackles various thought-provoking topics on the human condition and nature of reality. She is a director and producer known for Superhuman, The Invisible Made Visible, The Unexplained, and Among Us, which we will be discussing tonight. She continues to lecture and coach internationally on various mind matter subjects and appears regularly as a guest expert on supernatural phenomena at major conferences and television shows, including The Unexplained with William Shatner and History Channel's popular series Ancient Aliens. Caroline, welcome back. How you doing?
Hey, Chris, good to see you again. We had a blast last time. So when you said come back on, I was like, yeah.
Of course. Yeah. And like I was telling you earlier, Among Us was awesome, on par as usual. And it comes at a perfect time when the world's collective consciousness has been seeded with UFOs could be real. Among the other high strangeness that is becoming more widely examined by the mainstream. So we have a lot to talk about. And last time you were on, we discussed your film Superhuman. So let's talk about what brought you to produce and bring about Among Us.
Well, actually, I did Among Us before Superhuman, to be honest. But what's so interesting is it kind of disappeared. And then because of everything that's going on with UFOs nowadays, it all of a sudden resurrected. You know, it's like it's on the most watched, on Amazon Prime, most popular films, most recommended. I mean, it's like, I couldn't believe it. It keeps popping up. I don't know if that's where you watched it, but it's definitely
I did on Amazon, yeah.
Yeah, it's like so popular right now. So I'm psyched, you know?
Yeah, it's great. And like I said, the film was amazing. I was glued to the screen the whole time. And I want to start a little bit about the beginning, because I think that's a great place to start, especially with the context that you put it in there when you were talking about your imaginary friends. And there's so many stories I hear about young children with imaginary friends, and they're just kind of put off as just that, imaginary, and they're not looked at any further. And, this phenomenon is not really examined at all. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your experiences with imaginary friends.
Yeah, so I had a first experience when I was 5. That's the most significant experience I had. But I'm sure I had some before then, or that I can't remember. But this one was very significant because I remember every detail. Those beings appeared, and there was like a group of them, and they started talking to me, communicating with me telepathically. And this is where I realized that, I could see them, I could hear them, I knew everything about them in that moment. So how could this be, So from that point on, it led me to start thinking about the process that I had to go through, obviously unconscious, spontaneous, right? And so to be able to get there, to connect with them. And so because of that, I kept kind of wanting to know how did this happen? How is it possible you can connect and telepathically communicate spontaneously? And so because of that, I kind of stayed in the field of consciousness and telepathy and these sorts of things, which kind of kept me open, to more and more experiences. So I call them imaginary friends because I know a lot of kids see them just like I did. And but I think they're more than that. I think they're part of our lineage, part of our story. But at least that's what they're referred to, as, nowadays by mainstream people,
Yes, exactly. And as you kind of put it in the documentary, they taught you things, and I've heard this amongst many experiencers that have had childhood experiences, that some of these experiences, they're being, explained how some parts of the universe work, or mathematics, or just being taught important things in general. And the same happened to you, right?
Yeah, so that was my first lesson, if you will. It's more of what happens is it's not like they teach you like teachers, they don't tell you, okay, this is how. It's almost like a realization, you come in contact with them and then you get these kind of spontaneous understanding. And so the first thing they said was that we're connected always, like this connection is never severed. It was almost like I was on this side of the veil and they're on the other side of the veil. But it's the same thing. It's like the same consciousness. And what they said is that we think we're separate, but we're not. And so all you have to do is to know how to kind of open up to this stream of consciousness. And when you do, but in order to keep that kind of highway, if you will, open, you have to ask. People think like, okay, so who am I asking? Like, do I have to ask permission? It's not about permission or anything. It's about, in this context, it's about focusing your intention. I'm asking, meaning, I really want this. I really want this. You know what I mean? And it is so important, so important. People don't realize, they think like things just happen. Even when they think it happens, on an unconscious level, you must have asked for it. So this is the dynamics of the universe, is for you to put out a specific intention, focus your mind in a certain way. So that was the first lesson, so to speak. But after that, it was more kind of understanding my abilities. It was more like they would put me in like a situation or something. Like, for example, I would come across somebody that I'd never met before. Like, let's say I just met you, through a friend or something. And it's kind of like they would give me the inspiration to try to see something that, for example, you're telling me you have a problem or whatever. And so they would kind of guide me, like they would entice me, they would push me to ask the question, what is the root cause of his problem, even though you never told me anything about it? So I would kind of get that inspiration, and then I would kind of ask for it, and then it would show up. And so it's almost like they would guide me in this very subtle way to discover all the things that I could do.
That's very
Does
cool.
that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And you've done something for this film that I'm really glad you did, and I'm glad that there are a lot of people that are also doing the same thing, is talking to experiencers about this. And I think they're some of the most important people that we could learn about this phenomenon from, because they're the ones directly interacting with it. And you interviewed a lot of experiencers, and they've had such common experiences, and most of them being positive experiences. And not only that you discovered that this is a global phenomenon. I was hoping you could speak a little bit to those aspects, and what is the most profound commonalities that you found amongst the experiencers that you've interviewed?
Yeah, because a lot of times we think, people come in contact with ETs and it's scary, or, so I wanted to bring the fact that it's not always scary. In fact, my first experience was not scary at all. And that's the reason why I stayed open to the idea, because I wasn't scared. It was fantastic. These beings felt so much better than humans, So that's why I wanted to bring other people, other experiences who had, kind of positive. Now, not everybody, of course, there are also not so good effects as well. And so that's why I wanted to highlight all of this in the movie. The common denominator for those who do have a positive experience is they come back from it learning some sort of ability and having healed something very, very profound, a huge like aha moment, and with some sort of ability to heal, ability to download information. Sometimes it's very precise. Sometimes it's literally some scientific formula or something that, you're not supposed to know. So that is the common denominator with the folks who have positive experiences. Those who have negative experiences, that's a whole different ballgame. It's usually an abduction. It's usually more traumatizing. It's usually something they don't want to remember. And they're taken on a ship. There, some sort of testing and a medical analysis is done on them. So it's more these types of commonalities.
Now, for the negative experiences, we should touch on that for a second, since you mentioned it. Do these people who report these negative experiences, do they, remain negative the more they experience them, or do they eventually become more positive experiences the more they learn or remember them?
It's funny. I think unfortunately, what I've seen, because I've started working with so many people who didn't know each other. And that's how I kind of realized, like, wait, these people, this person just told me this. And then the next day, this other person, didn't know anything about, so through a regression session would say the exact same thing. And so in general, those folks that have negative experiences, they come to terms with it through the regression session that I do with them. They understand more. They heal the trauma. They can go on with their life. I don't know if all of a sudden they want more of it, but at least they come to terms with it and they're at peace with it. Those who have positive experiences, it's almost like they don't want to let go. They want more and more and more and more. And that's really fascinating, because then it helps you with your daily life. You learn so much about why you're here, why they're communicating with you. And that's very, very fortunate.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the interview I did with the head of the Center for Consciousness Research Institute, and he said that, among experiencers, most of them come back seeking a more spiritual life, bettering themselves, becoming more healthy, just wanting to make their own lives better in certain ways. And I find that very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very positive. It has a positive effect on that, and it keeps helping them evolve. They want to know more. They want to understand. They want to live a better life. And something very specific that they come back with is they all of a sudden feel they have a calling. It's almost like they have a clarity on their mission. It's like, I am here to help people heal, or I'm here to write, to use my writing abilities or my artistic abilities or something like that. Sometimes it's much simpler than that. Sometimes it's just about learning how to parent. You have to be a good parent and things like that. People think that it's always some message about saving the world. It's not necessarily that. It's because it's about the energy. It's not so much what you do. It's more what you are. Because when you understand who you are, what you are, then you transmit that energy through everything that you do. You see, so you don't have to try to do something. You have to try to be yourself. And that translates into doing the right thing.
Yes, that actually makes sense. I hope that makes sense to the audience, because that's a great way to look at it. One of my favorite aspects of this is the vast differences in the beings and entities that people report. Some report, similar beings and similar entities that could be of the same species or race, like the little gray beings that are commonly reported, but they have a wide variety of other beings. Some, humanoid looking, some less human looking. And I find that very interesting that there are so many different types of beings that are trying to communicate with the human race.
Yeah, exactly. I think the most common ones we hear about, is the reptilians, the little grays. Sometimes, we talk about Pleiadians and, maybe Arcturians, it's kind of like there's a group that is always referred to as the aliens. But I wanted to specify in my movie, in fact, the beings that I saw when I was 5 were none of these beings. It's almost like I've never heard of anybody mentioning that. And so that's the reason why I was fascinated. I eventually discovered so many types of universal beings that nobody talked about. So they're in the movie, but it's also in my book. If people are interested, I wrote a book called The Divine Plan. And it kind of, because we're talking about a type of lineage, and certain types of lineages are so massive. It's like they're, you have to think of the material beings kind of as one category, if you will. And then there are other bigger mass consciousness beings, and then bigger and bigger. And I'm not talking bigger and meaning better. It's not that sort of bigger, higher. It's not a hierarchy. It's just different. It's kind of like you and the dog. Who's better, you or the dog? You can't compare, because the dog can do things that you can't do, and vice versa. But who has a larger consciousness mass? You do, because you can create in a different way. You can do certain things. You can do more things than the dog. Does that make sense? So yes. Even though there are beings that have a large mass of consciousness, they can perform and do certain tasks that other types of material beings cannot do. For example, there are certain types of universal beings that can literally create energy, create a physical planet. So you right now, you can't create a physical planet, so their consciousness mass is much bigger, and they can do something like that. You cannot do that right now, but you can do certain things in the physical world that these guys cannot do. Does that make sense? So these are the types of beings that I talk about, because I have come to understand and come in contact with those types of beings. And I talk about them in the book and a little bit in the movie, for people to realize that, wait, it's not just like those reptilians and the grays and that's it. There's so much more that we don't know and we don't understand. And the reason being, these larger universal beings have a hard time kind of coming through the material world, because they're so big. It's like they cannot fit, in our little configuration. And so when they do, it's kind of like we see a piece of them. And it's almost like, so that's why we don't see an entire being. We see like kind of a hand, or of course it's not a hand. I'm just saying, because they're so big. And so they appear as an orb, or they appear as like little ball of light or something. So we think, oh, it's a UFO, or we think, oh, it's some sort of anomaly or something, when in fact it's a part of a being, you see. And so that's why, I wanted to talk more about those things. And why is that important? First of all, to expand the awareness of what extraterrestrials are. It's not those 3 categories and that's it, but also when you expand your consciousness, I wanted to also bring the understanding of lineages, that some of us on this planet come not just from those other extraterrestrial known lineages, but some of us come from those other types of lineages. And so by me introducing that idea and showing some of them in the film, I feel like people will kind of have some sort of subconscious aha moment, or at least recognize something in them that will push them to kind of try to ask more questions. Wait, is this me? Is this the energy that I have come from?
Right. Yes, that's excellent. And you were talking about the communication that occurs with some of these beings being telepathic, and I've experienced this myself. I've had a
Cool.
telepathic conversation with a being, and it is amazing. It's instantaneous. Got the answers before I was even finished asking the questions, and the amazing love energy that came along with it is something I couldn't even describe. Now, when you were talking a little bit about how this kind of telepathic communication could be possible, you cited an experiment from former astronaut Edgar Mitchell, and I thought that was very cool as to kind of cite that example. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think this experiment that he did was not an official thing, and I don't think it was recorded anywhere. But I was working with the astrophysicist Rudy Shield, who knew Edgar personally. They were friends. In fact, they founded a foundation together. They created a foundation together, and so Rudy. I worked with him on several, for a long time. And so Rudy was just telling me stories and things that Edgar had shared with him privately. And so when he was on one of the missions, he privately asked one of the handlers at the base to do an experiment to project a thought to see if he was able to telepathically receive the message. And it was successful. And so what he was able to prove, and like I said, because I think at the time also, he didn't want to talk about it because, people thought that was weird and crazy and, he's an astronaut. But what happened was that told him that his thought when he was on the moon, by the handler receiving, or vice versa, receiving the telepathic message instantaneously while he was on the moon, meant that the thought traveled faster than the speed of light. It was literally instantaneous. And so I thought that was brilliant. I thought, wow, everybody should hear about this. And that's why I wanted to include it in the movie.
Yeah, and it says a lot about how this, communication could possibly be instantaneous with these other beings as well. And then you get it a lot further into it, and you start going into the universal consciousness connection, which I've been talking about a lot as well, about how everything in this universe is connected to our consciousness, and we in turn can communicate with everything, and the energy is shared all among us, and that there's this universal type of entity that is connected to everything. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about how this universal consciousness could travel throughout the universe, and you posed a theory about connecting to black holes. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So this is a theory, of course. No one's, been able to prove any of this, but part of my, when I was able to kind of perceive the subtle energy, I could not only connect with other beings and communicate that way, but I realized that I could see literally the fabric of space, literally the space between me and you. I could see how it was made. And so it looks literally like a web, like a cobweb, like literally like just a web of a grid, a grid within a grid within a grid. It's super complex. And so what I noticed is that how this the geometry of this web, the line where the lines intersect, it's almost like this web allows you to have the experience of time space. And so you and I are separated. I mean, not right now, obviously we're far away, but even if you're standing here, the space between us would be made out of this web, but we're also inside a larger web. It's almost like it's all over. It's not just between me and you. It's between everybody and around the planet. And so I realized that when I looked at this grid, this pattern of space, that the information was literally traveling like a quantum wave was traveling on this cosmic web. And that's what gave us the impression, the illusion of being inside time and space. Like we have the impression that time is going by linearly, and we're inside, 3D space. But in fact, when you are at those intersection points within the grid, it's almost like you're outside time and space. You know how sometimes you do a meditation, for those who have that experience, and all of a sudden you feel like you're out of body, but you also feel you're everywhere and you're nowhere.
I've had that experience before myself.
Yeah,
yes.
There you go. So that's because you're detaching from the time space. You're kind of like you departicularize, like your body's like all the particles are kind of fragmented, and you become everything and everywhere. And this is possible when you go through these nodes. So to me, I compare these nodes, these intersecting points, like black holes, because when you go inside and when you come out from the other side, you basically are in a different reality altogether, which means that those points, I call them 0 points. So these 0 points is almost like you exist here, and then you go into the black hole or the 0 point. So you exist less and less and less and less and less until you stop existing within time space. And then as you come out again, you start to exist again, a little bit at a time, gradually, and then you resurface as a new, different type of reality altogether. So it's kind of like it's an entry exit point, and these nodes are everywhere.
And it also could explain UFO travel, right?
Exactly. So if these points are all around us, and through these points you're traveling in and out of time space, it's very possible that other beings are going through these portals, and they are resurfacing in our time space, and then going back out in the same way. So from our perspective, we're looking out to the sky or for a being, and then we see, oh, they're appearing and then they're disappearing. But actually they are materializing through the 0 point in and out. So there's a beautiful animation in the film. You remember, you saw that, of the grid.
Yes.
And I think many people loved it because it kind of gives you a visualization of, that whole patterning of space, and it starts to make a lot of sense. You start to connect the dots between UFOs, between beings, between downloads, and between your brain connecting to all of that.
Yeah, it would make a sense of a lot of the travel and possibilities with these unexplained phenomena in the sky. Now I want to move on to another interesting aspect of the documentary is star languages. And this is something that I've not seen very much of, and I found it very interesting. I may have heard of it 1 or 2 times, but I've never actually heard a person speak this star language. And you had a couple of experiencers that were actually able to kind of connect to these beings and share a language with us. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I stumbled on this a while ago, and then I was like, wait, how is that? What are they speaking? Are they making this up? Or, of course, I had all kinds of weird experiences. So I just wanted to kind of understand the mechanics of it. And I realized that these guys, I mean, of course, I can't speak for everybody, but the people that I kind of, worked with, basically, it's almost like they shift their consciousness or they merge with a consciousness that is non-human. It's almost it's not really channeling, but it's more matching your vibration, your brain to someone else's, and allowing, it's like a spontaneous download. And so as you are trying to speak, you're allowing this other consciousness to kind of bring down, that information through their language. And so I thought that was fascinating. And a lot of people, I was really very pleasantly surprised because a lot of people resonated with that a lot. Some people would say, I listened to this and it sounded familiar. It's almost like I recognize what he was talking about. So I thought that was fascinating. I'm very happy I included it in the film. But I also had an interesting experience with one of the kids in the movie, Zach. So what happened was I didn't know what he was going to say. And I didn't we were filming, right? It was spontaneous. It wasn't rehearsed. And I had no idea what was going to come out. So I thought, I wonder if I can kind of just tune into the vibration of the sound of what he's saying. And even though I don't speak that star language, but I just wanted to know what that would be like. So he's talking, and I'm focusing on just the vibration of the words. And I started to have images, I started to see things, and I remember the few scenes that I saw. It was something inside an Egyptian temple or something like that. I saw him or someone else, maybe, I don't remember, but as a 10-year-old kid, something like that, standing in that temple, and there was some sort of ceremony. So this is what came to me. I was like, okay, whatever,
Yeah,
And
I thought
then,
it was very interesting when he also said that these are more of tonal frequencies that you interpret with your heart and not your mind. That was very
exactly.
interesting to me.
Yeah. And so after the fact, I said, Zach, do you know what you said? And he said exactly what I had seen. He said, it's something about Egyptian. I don't remember the details right now because we did it after the filming. And then I was blown away that through my sensation, he had never taught me anything. And I've never, just to say that it's all about vibration. And it's exactly what you said. You pick up the information through the heart. I think it's not just heart as in heart, but in terms of an experience. Everything is energy is an experience. And when you allow it as an experience, then you understand what you're being told. It's very cool.
It is. And that guy, Zach, he seemed to be a pretty young little guy, right?
Yeah, he was 18 at the
Wow.
time.
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, he's awesome. You should see how he talks. He talks like a little Nikola Tesla guy. It's
Yeah,
pretty
I mean, since you brought that up, he kind of had I guess, an experience with a possible Tesla spiritual entity, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think he tells this story in the film, and Nikola Tesla appeared to him and gave him a message. And of course, and he taught, he's 18 years old. He talks like some big scientist, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
So he claims, and I believe him, that that Nikola Tesla downloaded and kind of shared some information with him at the time.
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting kid. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. The next part that I want to go to is about the crop circles, because this is another kind of form of communication that we don't understand. It's been pushed off as a hoax by so many people, but there's aspects of it, too many aspects that can't be explained, especially, the formation and how these things won't break and some of the materials and residues left behind. But aside from that, the amazing designs and what they could possibly be communicating with these crop circles. And you actually had a little experience yourself with a crop circle, right?
Yeah. So I went to Wiltshire, England, which is very famous for crop circles. And it's very interesting because they have like these, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they have these websites where usually crop circles are done at night. And so in the morning, like you'd have all these postings like, oh, this crop circle just showed up here, or this, and then you have people flocking over there trying to see the first, that the crop circle that was just created. And so I went to this one that just popped up, and it was very interesting because, of course, we had a drone, so we could see what it was. But I wanted to just kind of walk through it and I just kind of feel it out. So it was very interesting. I tried to kind of make my way to the center, and I started to kind of feel the vibration, and something very weird happened to me. I mean, not happened, but just kind of a realization. I felt, obviously I'm very sensitive. So instead of feeling expanded and feeling amazing and things like that, I wanted to know how it was created. And so I saw the consciousness of the being that created it. And it felt like a little kid. It felt like an extraterrestrial little kid, like an immature little gray being or something like that. And I was very shocked because I was like, you think that, wow, whoever created this must be so advanced, and maybe they are very advanced technologically, but it doesn't mean they're advanced spiritually or their consciousness is evolved, So that was a fascinating kind of realization, when I saw that being that created it, it was like, oh, wow, it's not a very evolved consciousness. So that was interesting.
Yeah, and that kind of brings us to the point of maybe that's what's occurring with some of these negative experiences. Possible. You touched on the hybrid program in the movie as well, but do you think that could be what's happening with some of these more negative experiences? Is they are not evolved consciously or spiritually like some of the other beings that have been interacted with?
For sure, because if they are, then they wouldn't be manipulating, they wouldn't be doing abduction. Abduction by definition is kind of taking somebody by force. And so if they're doing that, then obviously they're not evolved spiritually. However, they're very evolved technologically. So they understand energy, they understand consciousness, they understand all sorts of, vibrational things and how to move energy, shift energies. They know all of that. So to me, I call that kind of technology. It's the consciousness, the technology of consciousness, if you will, the mechanism. So they got that down, but the fact that they're using it to manipulate humans, in those cases, tells me they're just not as evolved as we think they are, which is a big myth. We think extraterrestrial equals higher intelligence. Well, not necessarily.
Yeah, that's right, and it's a good way to think about it. And I think more experiencers who believe that this is all a positive phenomenon and these beings are all to better us and enlighten us, well, maybe not all of them. But I want to touch on the hybrid aspect of it since we were just talking about it, because so many people also report seeing hybrid children, having their eggs and sperm harvested, other types of experiments going on, DNA experiments. But the fact that they actually go back and meet their children is very interesting to me, and some of their children don't look human at all. So that's a real fascinating aspect of this whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. So same thing, as I was investigating this and working with many people doing regressions, they would talk about being on a ship and seeing their children. And I'd be like, okay, tell me about that. And so eventually kind of, I saw kind of the whole thing. And that's another common denominator. For people who are being abducted usually have some sort of experience that involves genes, like genetics. Their sperm is taken out, or the eggs, obviously in the case of women, And they're aware that they're being taken for some sort of genetic experimentation. And so sometimes they're being told that, hey, this is to co-create a being. And so the next time they are abducted again, they are being shown basically the offspring that they helped create. And what's so fascinating is that the people who have hybrid children, I mean, they're not scared. Like, they're almost like, oh, I just went to see my kid, on a spaceship. It sounds so bizarre, but they really develop normal parental, connection with the children. And they say, oh, I'm going to see my kid, on the spaceship, and this is his name. That's what he looks like, and this and this and that. So I find that fascinating. Okay, just imagine if somebody shows up and introduces you to like a child who's half human and who looks very strange. I mean, he does not look human at all. And then they say, okay, here's your kid. He's half some other extraterrestrial race. I mean, what would you say?
Yeah, that's something that would take a few minutes. You might want to have a seat on that one. But
right?
You also mentioned human hybrids, which means that they could have species on this planet that look exactly like us, and no one would be able to tell that there's any kind of, alien species within this person. Do you think that there are extraterrestrials that are walking amongst us that are part of these hybrid programs?
So you and I are hybrids in a way, not necessarily half weird extraterrestrial race, not at all, but everybody is a hybrid in a sense that you come from another part of the universe, even from the local universe, even from very close by, you still come with a lineage. Sometimes it's human and most of the time it is not. And so, but as soon as you incarnate in this body, then you have the human DNA, but you don't stop having your original DNA. So everybody's, is human with part something else. But what we're talking about is not just that. We're talking about actual embryos, for example, that are taken from pregnant women, that are experimented with, injected, mixed with an extraterrestrial DNA, and put back in the mother's womb. So now this child is going to be born as a human, but specifically with the manipulated, it's a genetically modified DNA. That's a whole different story. And there are plenty of those. And what I found also was these cases were very common in the Air Force. There were all sorts of strange programs that way, where the wives of officers or what have you would go through an experience like that, of course, unknowingly, which is kind of freaky. So the father usually knows, obviously because he's part of the program, but not the mothers. So these are the real hybrids that are really walking among us, because they were genetically manufactured, if you will. So they look human, but they have a large percentage of not just one, but perhaps a mix of extraterrestrial races.
Now, when we're talking about DNA, you also did a scientific experiment to kind of prove that this DNA could be the key and connection to everything, even with the communication between these beings. And I thought it was a fascinating outcome to this experiment, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I was doing experiments, all sorts of experiments with Glenn Ryan. He worked with DNA taken from the women placenta. but also with water. So we did all sorts of experiments. And so when I was making this film, I said, well, so many people report after an abduction or a contact experience, real changes, like physiological changes to the body. Is there a way that we can test it? Like, can we show that even a non-visible entity can literally have a physiological effect on your body? And he said, I've never done this before, Caroline. Yeah, I don't know. I said, well, we'll just try it. If it doesn't work, we'll just, we won't put it in a movie or whatever. And he said, okay. He was very intrigued. And sure enough, so, we have this sample of DNA and we said, let's measure the electrical conductivity, meaning the electricity going through the sample. That is easily measurable, and and it is an effect on the DNA itself. So I said, okay, fine. So he puts this DNA, we take the electrical conductivity, we measure it several times for people to who are listening. Scientifically, you create a baseline, meaning you measure a sample over and over and over to have that baseline. And then exactly as I'm focusing on it, I'm pretending that I'm a non-visible entity. I'm projecting energy. So just like an extraterrestrial would do that to us, right? And so I'm projecting energy on this thing, and all of a sudden it just like jumps like 400%. And he was like, what just happened here? And we did it again and again and again. So it wasn't a fluke. And then when I stopped doing it, it just went back to the baseline, which was very freaky. So, and I've done this experiment so many times. So it wasn't just this one time where, you would say, well, it's a coincidence, So that's how I've never seen anybody demonstrate that. And I thought that was very cool to show how someone's thoughts, someone's energy could literally change the electricity of the body. And when you change the electricity, you change the information. You're moving stuff through your biological system. That's crazy. It means it's changing potentially the molecular structure, potentially the chemistry, who knows what else, because electricity is going to move stuff around.
And that could be the answer to, a lot of healing,
Yes.
through thought, just through thought processes and intention,
Exactly. So think about that. If we did it this way, what if you're projecting that you want to flush out, you want the electricity to flush out negative thoughts or whatever it is, that's exactly how energy healing works. And so we were blown away. The very first time I remember Glenn, he was like, well, maybe that's a mistake. Let's do it again. He got very nervous, like, is this for real? And I remember the audio guy, because we were measuring in ohms in resistance. And it was so high. I can't remember the numbers now, but it was a very high number. And so that's how it was very fascinating, his reaction. And that's why we did it again and again and again. And sure enough, it works.
And it's very interesting because, mainstream science, I guarantee, won't pick up on this because it seems that it would be a threat to a lot of their institutions. If we could heal through intent and frequency and energy, it would solve a lot of the world's problems, but it would cost them a lot of money.
For sure. And also, well, first of all, when somebody, coming from that perspective, when they see it right away, they're going to dismiss it. They're going to see every fault and they're going to say, oh, you just did it once. Oh, there's a problem with the device, or there's, without even really investigating, how we did it. So that's like half the people totally dismiss it. And then the other half who are already skeptics, like you said, they're going to be like, wait, this is like hocus pocus, I'm not going there. Let me just stick to my science that I've studied, I'm not going to throw away all these years to get a degree and it's okay. But, at the end of the day, I guarantee, there's a lot of scientists I know that started out very, like Newtonian, like that's it, this is what it is. And then when they start to investigate just a little bit, or at least have an experience, that's another thing. Eventually they get to the question of consciousness. I mean, like at one point they were like, okay, everything I know does not explains the physical world. Yes, it explains a lot, but that it does not explain. And then they start to open up. And I guarantee eventually that's where science is going. It has to.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that it could go in any other direction, especially with the independent researchers and scientists that are coming up with all these answers before the mainstream scientists. It's going to make them look bad.
Yeah, exactly. But again, half of them are going to dismiss it right off the bat, which is fine. But
yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Let the ones who really want to figure this stuff out do it. Now, we got a few minutes left. I'd love to get your thoughts on the current kind of UFO disclosure mainstream climate that we're seeing right now. It's been slowly kind of upticking since that 2017 New York Times article about, the UFOs and the Tic Tac and everything like that. But recently we've had even more interest in it, and it seems like it's being implanted into the mass populace's consciousness that UFOs exist. But for what reason? I don't know, and I don't really trust the sources that the current disclosure is coming from, but I find it interesting that they are talking about it now, and I want to get your thoughts on what could possibly be behind it. What do you think is going on in the past few years with UFOs?
Well, there's definitely an agenda, because it's kind of weird. It's been ignored for so long, and all of a sudden, UFOs are real. We just don't know what it is. The UAP report was a bit of a joke. I mean, yes. Of course, a lot of a joke. I mean, of course, in one way, it's incredible what it did in the sense of at least admitting. So I think for the mainstream, it's extraordinary that, hey, what? Our government is looking into UFOs. So that part, I think, is very, very, very positive. So I'm very happy about that. But, the folks who have been in the field and understand that, what's going on, it was kind of a joke that this is the United States government. And there's from all the researchers since Hynek, who's a renowned scientist in the field, to all the cases that were validated by very, very credible sources, the amount of reports. There are databases that I know of that weren't even mentioned. These are all NASA scientists who reported, very credible research, certain cases. So all of this huge amount of information for them to say there was 144 cases, only 9 are credible. You know what I mean? It's really, and we know for sure it's not us. We know for sure it's not a foreign adversary. We know for sure it's not a weather or whatever. We don't know what it
Swamp
is.
Gas.
So, yeah. So we don't know what it is. Therefore, give us money so we can investigate. I don't know about that. Chris, come on. It's just really? Okay. Yeah. So there was other reports that I think the French one is, I don't know how many 100 pages or whatever, 300 pages or something. So I mean, it's really kind of embarrassing in that sense that, that's kind of what we were left with. But again, on a positive note, it made such a huge impact on the mainstream. I mean, everywhere you look right now, it's okay to talk about UFOs. You're no longer crazy because the New York Times is talking about it. Washington Post is talking about it. So in that sense, it's very positive and hopeful. But what's the agenda? Well, the first agenda, we need more money. So that's that for Space Force or whatever else. Second agenda, could it be a distraction for something else that's going on? For sure. That's a typical policy that comes with politics, period. I mean, I think it's a big, and the disinformation goes with whatever else they have going on. So yeah. Of course, it's timely because there's all kinds of stuff going on they don't want us to know about.
There is, and I think one of the most important aspects of this that most people who don't really look at the phenomenon in a personal way is that this phenomenon is mainly a personal phenomenon. It's not for large groups of people. It's for the individual. It's for you to seek out and experience yourself, because otherwise I don't think you can really understand it. And that's what I've come to understand over the years, that this is more of a singular interpersonal experience between the experiencer and that experience.
Yeah. And another thing about this report is that if they're telling us we don't know, it's not this, it's not us, okay, so, but we don't know. So why is there a classified version?
Exactly. Yes.
Like, I mean, what are they, if everything they looked at, they came to the conclusion that it's nothing and we don't know. So what is classified?
That
you know
is
what
the
I
big
mean?
question.
If there's something classified, it means there's something they found that either they can't talk about, or meaning they know what it is. So don't tell us you don't know. You see what I mean?
Exactly,
So
yes.
to me, like, there's a lot of like little like kind of holes in this whole story. So yeah, and then at the end of the day, to also another positive thing, like what you just said, it's really about the experience, validating that you're not crazy, that this is real. Just keep focusing on what it is that you've experienced, trust, and just ask for more guidance, because it's true. Sometimes we do get carried away and we misread and we think we saw something and it's not. That's true. We do need to get more education on that. But at least it's, at the end of the day, it's how the experience affected you, and to kind of bring it back to your individual consciousness and the reason for it, so you can learn and evolve.
Awesome. Caroline, I want to thank you so much for coming on again and talking with us tonight. Among Us is available on Amazon. Everybody can go check that out right now very easily. And I know you have some more exciting stuff that you're working on, some super secret stuff that we're going to have you back on to talk about.
Super. Speaking of secret, I'm hiding. It's classified. Yeah, I'm just in post-production on my new movie, but I will be talking about it. It's crazy incredible.
Awesome.
Crazy. You're going to be blown away. So, but in the meantime, people should watch Among Us on Amazon Prime, and also Superhuman.
Yes.
Superhuman is also very, very powerful. It's on Tubi TV right now. So it's free for
Tubi's
everyone.
Awesome.
Yeah. So Superhuman, the Invisible Made Visible, Tubi, you don't have to sign up. You don't have to pay. So I think a lot of people should also watch that one. It's very, very helpful about this whole thing.
Definitely, and we also talked about that the last time you were on, so you can check out that interview is on our show as well. And Caroline, thank you so much for coming on again tonight. That was fantastic, and we'll definitely talk again after your new movie comes out.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Chris. It was awesome. I always have fun with you.
Awesome. Well, have a great night, Caroline. Until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow.